You think soul food was always about expensive Sunday feasts? Think again. Black grandmothers turned the cheapest ingredients into meals that fed entire families and filled homes with love. Here are 60 cheap soul food dishes your grandma always had on the table.
Seasonal cooking and preservation meant that 1970s soul food followed rhythms modern convenience has erased. Families ate what grew in current seasons and preserved the rest through canning, smoking, and pickling. Summer meant fresh tomatoes and corn, fall brought sweet potatoes, and winter relied on what had been put up during abundant months. This approach meant anticipation for favorite foods and genuine appreciation when they appeared. Canned tomatoes made in August carried summer flavor through cold months, and pickled vegetables added brightness to winter meals. The connection between earth and table was immediate. When supermarkets made everything available year-round, soul food lost its calendar and the special meaning seasonal availability once provided. Eating strawberries in January eliminates the joy waiting once created.
Miniature cornbread muffins with honey butter were golden gems that children popped into their mouths whole, the crumbly cornbread texture melting while sweet honey butter added richness. Mothers would prepare cornbread batter using stone-ground cornmeal, flour, eggs, buttermilk, and just enough sugar to balance the corn's natural earthiness, then spoon it into mini muffin tins that baked quickly. The muffins emerged from ovens with crispy, slightly caramelized tops and tender, crumbly interiors that begged to be broken open and slathered with butter. Honey butter was made by whipping softened butter with honey until fluffy and smooth, creating a spread that melted instantly when slathered on hot muffins. In the 1970s, Black households, these miniature cornbread muffins represented Southern hospitality in bite-sized form. Children loved them because they were individually portioned, making them feel like special treats rather than ordinary bread, and the sweet honey butter made every bite feel indulgent and special. Blackberry cobbler without sugar proved that fruit's natural sweetness could create desserts when refined sugar wasn't available. Wild blackberries grew abundantly along fence lines and in abandoned fields, free for anyone willing to brave thorns and summer heat to pick them. Black families sent children out with buckets, returning with purple-stained hands and enough berries to make cobblers that lasted days. The berries were cooked down until their juices concentrated, natural sugars intensifying without any additions. Simple biscuit dough made from flour, lard, and buttermilk was dropped over the bubbling fruit, then baked until golden. The result was tart and intense, less sweet than modern desserts, but deeply satisfying in ways sugar-laden versions never achieve. These cobblers appeared at church socials and family gatherings, proof that celebration didn't require money. Women competed quietly over whose cobbler turned out best, pride coming from skill rather than expensive ingredients. The practice of picking wild berries taught children about seasons, patience, and finding abundance in nature with steadfast pride.
Pineapple upside-down cake was the retro showstopper that emerged from cast iron skillets onto 1970s Christmas dessert tables with glistening caramelized fruit. Brown sugar and butter melted together in the skillet, then pineapple rings and maraschino cherries were arranged in the sticky mixture before batter was poured over top. After baking, the cake was flipped dramatically, revealing golden fruit embedded in caramel glaze. The presentation never failed to impress guests who watched the unveiling. Canned pineapple rings and cherries cost little, yet created stunning visual impact. The cake tasted of tropical sweetness, balanced by buttery richness. Pineapple upside-down cake represented the 1970s love of dramatic presentation. The recipe proved that affordable ingredients could create celebration-worthy results.
Fried cabbage with bacon was proof that the simplest ingredients could turn into something extraordinary with the right hands. Cabbage, sliced thin and tossed into a hot skillet, hissed as it hit the bacon grease, filling the room with that unmistakable smoky smell that meant dinner was close. A sprinkle of salt, a shake of black pepper, maybe a dash of vinegar for those who liked it sharp. It did not take much to make it sing. This was weekday food, made in a hurry but never without heart. The bacon gave it depth, the cabbage gave it comfort, and together they made a dish that tasted like home. You could hear the crackle from another room, and everyone knew it was time to come to the table. Fried cabbage stretched to feed a family when the fridge looked empty, but it never felt like settling. It felt like making the best of what you had and being proud of it. Even today, that sizzle still feels like love passed down through the skillet. Turnip-top dumplings were humble food turned holy. You started with a pot of greens simmering low, their smoky scent winding through the house. Bits of flour dough were pinched and dropped into the bubbling pot, swelling as they cooked and soaking up every trace of pepper and salt. The broth grew thick and rich, tasting of the land and the love poured into it. People called it poor man's stew, but it filled the heart as much as the belly. Served steaming in old bowls, it felt like warmth made visible. Children dipped crusts of bread into it while adults closed their eyes and savored the peace it brought. The dumplings were soft and chewy, little pockets of memory, flavored by patience and time. It was a meal for winter nights, for families gathered close, for prayers whispered over steam. Turnip-top dumplings carried a lesson that still matters. Food is never about wealth, but about care. In every spoonful was the proof that small things, done with love, could feed a world. Fried catfish with hot sauce was the sound of oil popping, laughter from the porch, and music spilling from a radio. Each fillet was coated in cornmeal, fried crisp until the edges crunched. You'd know it was done when the smell hit, smoky and rich. It was more than dinner. It was an event, a family gathered under the same roof after a long week. You'd dip it in hot sauce and forget about the heat outside. Catfish fries were about joy, about coming together to eat, talk, and share stories long after the food was gone. The fryer hissed while voices rose in harmony, telling jokes and memories in equal measure. The golden fillets sat on paper towels, glistening like trophies of love and hard work. Kids ran around barefoot while grown folks argued over who fried it best. The air buzzed with music, the clatter of plates, and the hum of belonging. Fried catfish was more than just a meal. It was a gathering of hearts, a reminder that the best things in life often come sizzling, shared, and seasoned with love. In those moments, food was freedom. It was proof that flavor, laughter, and love could live in one pan.
Sakatumi cake was the 1970s phenomenon that became mandatory at Black Christmas gatherings. Its cinnamon swirl and rich glaze making it irresistible. Yellow cake mix was enriched with sour cream, oil, and eggs, then layered with brown sugar, cinnamon, and pecans before baking into moist perfection. The cake earned its playful name from the popular comedy catchphrase, and saying it while serving became part of the fun. A simple glaze of powdered sugar and milk drizzled over the finished cake added sweetness and shine. The recipe appeared in church cookbooks and was passed between neighbors on index cards. Sakatumi cake proved that box mixes could be transformed into something special with clever additions. The cake represented 1970s creativity and community in every slice. 7-Up cake was the moist pound cake that used lemon lime soda as its secret ingredient.
Rendered bacon fat stored in jars beside every stove was the secret weapon of 1970s soul food that modern kitchens have abandoned. This precious grease, saved from breakfast and accumulated over weeks, added smoky depth to vegetables and gravies that no other fat could provide. Cooks spooned it into cast iron before frying eggs, stirred it into green beans, and used it to start dishes that would otherwise taste flat. The fat carried concentrated pork flavor, transforming simple ingredients into something memorable. Children watched their mothers strain hot bacon grease into waiting containers, learning that waste was unacceptable and flavor worth saving. When health concerns eliminated this practice, soul food lost an essential flavor foundation. The dishes we make now without rendered fat are missing what made them worth eating.
Pimento cheese pinwheels made with tortillas spread with creamy pimento cheese and rolled into tight spirals created colorful, easy-to-eat bites that children grabbed enthusiastically. Aunties would spread flour tortillas with homemade pimento cheese made from sharp cheddar, cream cheese, diced pimentos, mayonnaise, and seasonings. The tortillas were then rolled tightly into logs, wrapped in plastic wrap, and refrigerated for several hours to firm up and make slicing easier. Once chilled, the logs were unwrapped and sliced into rounds about half an inch thick, each pinwheel revealing the bright orange cheese dotted with red pimento pieces. In 1970s, Black households' pimento cheese pinwheels represented modern entertaining, a variation on traditional pimento cheese that made serving easier and more elegant. Children loved pimento cheese pinwheels because they were perfectly portioned, colorful, and tasted like their favorite spread in a fun new format. Peach cobbler and cast iron was Summer Sunday's gift to Harlem families who stretched seasonal fruit into generous dessert that fed everyone at the table. Fresh peaches were sliced and tossed with sugar and cinnamon, then poured over batter made from flour, sugar, milk, and melted butter in a preheated skillet. The cobbler baked until the batter rose around the fruit, turning golden brown on top while staying soft underneath. Juices from the peaches bubbled up through the crust, creating pockets of caramelized fruit syrup that pooled at the edges invitingly. Families served it warm with cold cream poured over, the hot and cold temperatures creating perfect contrast in every spoonful. During peach season, cobblers appeared weekly, made in quantities large enough that leftovers survived until Tuesday breakfast. The cast iron gave the bottom crust an almost fried crispness that regular baking dishes could never match.
Hot water cornbread was the crispy fried bread that appeared alongside every 1970s soul food Christmas meal, its simplicity hiding deep roots. Cornmeal was mixed with boiling water and salt until it formed thick batter, then shaped into patties and fried until golden and crunchy. The exterior shattered while the interior stayed dense, perfect for soaking up Potlikker and gravies. Hot water cornbread required no eggs, milk, or leavening, making it affordable when budgets were tight. The technique came from African and Native American traditions passed through generations. Each family had preferred shapes, some making thin crisps, while others preferred thick pomes. Hot water cornbread proved that the simplest recipes often held the deepest heritage.
Bread pudding with raisins was what happened when nothing went to waste, not even yesterday's loaf. Torn bread soaked in sweetened milk and eggs, flavored with nutmeg and cinnamon, then baked until golden and soft inside. The smell alone could make you pause mid-step. It was that kind of warmth that stopped conversation. The raisins puffed up in the heat, little pockets of sweetness among the creamy bread. Served with a drizzle of vanilla sauce or a pat of butter, it was humble dessert at its finest. Every family had a variation. Some added a splash of whiskey, others a handful of pecans. But the soul of the dish stayed the same. It was comfort in a pan, a reminder that love could make even leftovers feel like luxury. The first spoonful melted on the tongue, rich and warm like memory itself. It was dessert born from thrift, yet rich with care and intention. Bread pudding taught generations that sweetness could come from struggle, that beauty could rise from what others might overlook. Bread pudding was more than dessert. It was a story of making do, of finding sweetness in scarcity, and of turning simple things into something unforgettable. Catfish stew was born from the rivers that fed hungry families when money could not. It was a fisherman's meal, made with whatever the day's catch brought in and whatever else could be spared. The fish simmered with onions, peppers, and a few spices until the broth turned hearty and golden. Sometimes a few potatoes or tomatoes joined the pot to stretch the servings further. The flavor was bold, earthy and honest, born of water, labor, and faith. Along the banks of muddy rivers, folks gathered to clean, season, and cook together, turning scarcity into celebration. Every spoonful tasted of resilience, the kind that came from knowing you could always find a way. Catfish stew wasn't just dinner, it was fellowship, a gathering around the fire with laughter and storytelling. Even when the world seemed empty, this stew filled bellies and hearts alike. It was the living memory of a people who found abundance in places others overlooked, a symbol of perseverance floating in a pot of simple, sustaining joy.
Hog killings in late fall provided fresh pork that transformed soul food for months afterward. Families gathered when temperatures dropped enough to safely process meat, turning a single hog into hams, bacon, sausage, and countless cuts. Nothing was wasted because every part had value, from the head becoming souse to intestines cleaned for chitterlings. The work was hard but communal, with neighbors helping each other and sharing the bounty. Fresh pork from a well-fed hog tasted entirely different from supermarket meat, its fat sweeter and flesh more flavorful. The transition to commercial processing eliminated not just this community ritual, but the quality of meat that made soul food exceptional. What we buy now cannot approach the taste of hogs raised on scraps, acorns, and thyme.
Green tomato slices served with remoulade sauce were crispy, tangy bites that introduced children to Southern traditions, the cornmeal coating providing crunch while the tart tomato inside stayed firm and flavorful. Mothers would slice green tomatoes thick, dredge them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour and spices, then fry them in hot oil until golden brown and crispy. The remoulade sauce was made from mayonnaise, mustard, pickles, capers, and spices, creating a tangy, creamy dip that complemented the fried tomatoes perfectly. Each slice was served hot with a small dish of sauce for dipping, the combination of temperatures and textures making every bite interesting. In 1970s, Black households, fried green tomatoes represented end-of-season resourcefulness, using tomatoes that wouldn't ripen before frost to create something delicious. Children loved fried green tomatoes because they were crispy like French fries but tasted tangy and different, expanding their understanding of what vegetables could be.
Blackberry cobbler was the summer dessert that appeared on 1970s Christmas tables when families preserved wild berries picked from roadsides and fence lines. Blackberries were sweetened and thickened slightly, then topped with biscuit dough or batter before baking until bubbling and golden. The fruit turned jammy while the topping crisped and absorbed berry juices at the edges. Families who picked and preserved their own berries made this dessert for almost nothing beyond sugar and flour. Blackberry cobbler connected Christmas celebrations to summer foraging traditions that sustained communities for generations. Served warm with ice cream or cold cream, it reminded everyone that abundance came from knowing the land. The cobbler proved that preserved summer bounty could brighten even the darkest winter days.
Corn pudding was that perfect middle ground between savory and sweet, a dish that could sit beside meat or stand proudly as dessert. Made with creamed corn, milk, butter, and sugar, it baked into a golden custard that jiggled just enough to make everyone lean in for a spoonful. It was often served warm, straight out of the oven, steam rising from the soft top as the smell of butter filled the room. Families would argue over whether it belonged next to the roast or after it, but no one argued about having seconds. The pudding had that rich, creamy texture that reminded you of childhood, when food wasn't fancy but always heartfelt. Some cooks added nutmeg or a splash of vanilla, while others kept it simple, letting the corn's natural sweetness speak for itself. Every bite was soft, almost melt in your mouth, and tasted like summer stored away for a rainy day. Corn pudding wasn't just a recipe, it was a reflection of resourcefulness, of turning simple crops into gold. You could find it at every holiday table, shining in its casserole dish like sunlight made edible. Even now, one taste brings back memories of laughter, blessings, and a table filled with more love than wealth. Corncob jelly was one of those miracles that made people smile at their own cleverness. When the corn was shucked and the cobs left behind, no one dared to throw them out. Those bare cobs went into a big pot of water, boiled until the water turned golden and sweet-smelling. Sugar and a little lemon juice got added next, then everything was strained until the liquid gleamed like honey. The result was a jelly that tasted faintly of corn, syrupy and light, the perfect spread for biscuits or toast. People used it when fruit was scarce, and it carried a quiet pride that came from turning scraps into sweetness. Grandparents remembered it from their childhood, when waste was not an option and imagination ruled the kitchen. Corncob jelly was proof that flavor could be coaxed out of what others might ignore. It was soft, shining, and made with patience. Those who tasted it never forgot that feeling of abundance born from scarcity. Each spoonful told the story of hands that worked hard, saved everything, and still found time to make something beautiful.
Fresh eggs from backyard chickens appeared in 1970s soul food with yolks so orange and rich they seemed to glow. Families kept small flocks scratching in yards, eating bugs and scraps, producing eggs with flavor that factory farms cannot replicate. These eggs made cornbread rise higher, custards set richer, and breakfast plates shine with color that supermarket eggs lack entirely. Children gathered eggs each morning as a chore, connecting them directly to their food. The shells were thicker, the whites firmer, and the taste unmistakably superior to anything bought in stores. When zoning laws and convenience eliminated backyard flocks from homes, soul food lost one of its most essential ingredients. Every cake, every custard, every fried egg today is a diminished version of what those backyard hands once provided.
Cheese ball rolled in pecans sat proudly on serving platters surrounded by crackers, its cream cheese base mixed with cheddar, green onions, and seasonings before being shaped into a perfect sphere and coated with chopped pecans. Aunties would soften cream cheese and mix it with shredded sharp cheddar, finely chopped green onions, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and sometimes hot sauce for complexity. The mixture was then shaped into a ball or log, wrapped in plastic, and chilled until firm enough to handle. Just before serving, the cheese ball was rolled in finely chopped pecans that created a crunchy, nutty coating contrasting beautifully with the creamy interior. In 1970s Black households, cheese balls represented sophistication and effort, centerpieces of appetizer spreads that showed guests the host had put thought into the gathering. Children loved them because they could spread the cheese themselves onto crackers, feeling grown-up and independent. Hoppin John with ham hock carried spiritual significance beyond its humble ingredients of black-eyed peas, rice, and smoked pork that filled Harlem kitchens. Every Sunday serving connected families to enslaved ancestors who first combined African legumes with Carolina rice on plantations centuries earlier. The ham hock simmered for hours before the peas were added, its smoky fat transforming dried beans into something approaching velvet. Rice was cooked separately, then folded gently into peas to prevent mushiness and keep grains distinct. Onions, garlic, and bay leaves provided depth, while vinegar brightened flavors at the end. This dish appeared especially on New Year's Day for luck, but Harlem families served it year-round as affordable protein that stretched. The peas symbolized coins, and the greens served alongside represented money, promising prosperity for all. Children learned to cook this young because it required attention but forgave mistakes. Hoppin John transformed poverty ingredients into cultural celebration.
Boiled custard was the drinkable dessert that appeared at 1970s Black Christmas gatherings, served in cups and sipped like liquid comfort. Milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla were cooked slowly on the stovetop, stirred constantly until the mixture thickened enough to coat a spoon. The custard was chilled and served cold, its richness falling somewhere between eggnog and melted ice cream. Making boiled custard required patience and attention, since the eggs could scramble if heated too quickly. Grandmothers passed down the technique, teaching younger cooks to feel when the custard reached perfect consistency. The drink cost little, yet tasted indulgent, providing festive refreshment without alcohol. Boiled custard proved that simple traditions carried forward, created connection between generations.
Hot water. Cornbread was the sound of sizzling batter and the smell of home. With just cornmeal, salt, and boiling water, cooks created a golden miracle that fed whole families for pennies. It was crisp on the outside, tender on the inside, and tasted like the countryside itself. The beauty of it was in its simplicity. No milk, no eggs, no fuss, just skill and heat. Each cake was fried in cast iron, often in saved bacon grease that gave it a smoky edge. Children would snatch them off the pan before they cooled, blowing on them between bites. It paired with everything, greens, beans, or stew, but it never needed company to shine. Hot water cornbread taught generations that good food came from the hands, not the wallet. It was born out of necessity but carried the pride of invention. The sound of cornmeal hitting the skillet was like a heartbeat, steady and sure, in homes that had seen hard times. A simple mix of grain and grit, it embodied the spirit of those who refused to go hungry or hopeless. Hot water. Cornbread was survival turned into comfort, one crispy bite at a time.
Wood stoves and slow cooking defined the pace and flavor of 1970s soul food in ways electric ranges cannot replicate. Many African American households, especially in the rural South, still cooked on wood-burning stoves, requiring constant attention that rewarded patience with unmatched results. The heat was uneven and demanded skill, teaching cooks to rotate pots, adjust dampers, and develop intuition modern appliances made unnecessary. Food cooked this way absorbed subtle smoke flavors and developed textures through hours of gentle simmering. Collard greens, neck bones, and beans transformed over these stoves into dishes with depth that instant pots cannot create. The decline of wood stove cooking took something irreplaceable from soul food tradition. What we gained in speed, we lost in patient flavors only time and fire could create.
Salmon croquettes served as mini appetizers were crispy golden patties that children devoured while standing in kitchens, their hands reaching for more before finishing what they were already eating. Grandmothers would drain cans of pink salmon, carefully picking through the meat to remove bones and skin, then flaking the fish into mixing bowls where it was combined with chopped onions, bell peppers, beaten eggs, cornmeal, and seasonings. The mixture was shaped into small patties, pressed firmly to ensure they held together, then carefully lowered into hot oil where they sizzled and turned golden brown. The exterior developed a crispy crust while the interior stayed moist and flavorful. In 1970s, Black households' salmon croquettes were economical elegance, transforming canned fish into something special worthy of holiday tables. Children loved them because they were handheld, didn't require forks, and packed protein and flavor into every crispy bite. Smothered chicken with rice and gravy defined Sunday tables when families wanted something special without expensive beef roasts taking up the budget. Whole chickens were cut into pieces, seasoned with salt, pepper, and paprika, then dredged in flour and fried golden brown until perfectly crisp. The chicken was then smothered in gravy made from pan drippings, onions, and broth, covered tightly, and cooked until meat nearly fell from the bone. The gravy turned silky brown, carrying flavor from seasoned flour and rendered chicken fat in every spoonful. Rice was prepared separately, each grain ready to catch every drop of precious gravy. Grandmothers judged younger cooks by their gravy consistency and ability to achieve that perfect golden crust before smothering began. This dish taught patience because rushing ruined everything about it. Families ate in reverent silence, broken only by requests for more gravy, more rice, and everything that made Sundays feel like salvation.
Lemon pound cake was the dense, buttery classic that anchored dessert tables at 1970s soul food Christmas celebrations with bright citrus punch. Real butter was creamed with sugar until fluffy, then eggs were added one at a time before flour and lemon juice joined the batter. The cake baked slowly until golden, its crust developing crunch while the interior stayed moist. Fresh lemon zest delivered fragrance that filled kitchens. Some bakers poked holes in the warm cake and poured lemon syrup through for extra moisture. Pound cake kept well for days, improving as flavors melded. Lemon pound cake proved that classic techniques with quality ingredients created timeless results. The cake represented the pride Black bakers took in perfecting recipes.
Field peas and fatback were the taste of the land itself, grown, seasoned, and served with pride. The peas came from backyard gardens or local fields, small and hearty, full of earth and sunlight. The fatback added salt and richness, sizzling in the pot before the peas went in, turning plain beans into a meal worth remembering. This was a dish that didn't need dressing up. It was honest, filling, and true. Families cooked big pots of it to last through the week, served with rice or cornbread to soak up every drop. The kitchen would fill with steam as the peas simmered slow, their scent mixing with that smoky fat and a little black pepper. Sometimes a neighbor would knock just to see if they could grab a bowl, and there was always enough to share. It was food that reminded people that simplicity wasn't lack. It was love made visible. Field peas and fatback taught everyone that simplicity was its own kind of luxury. It was food for the body and balm for the soul, shared with neighbors and passed down like a promise. Ash cake bread was born out of fire and hunger, a recipe that came alive in the heart of hard times. Cornmeal, salt, and water were all it needed. The dough was pressed together by hand and buried right into the hot ashes of a wood fireplace. It baked slowly, the outside hardening into a smoky crust, while the inside stayed soft, golden, and warm. When it came out, people brushed away the ashes, broke it open, and drizzled it with syrup or molasses. It had a taste that was both sweet and earthy, like the memory of home on a Sunday morning. Ash cake bread was a working person's meal, something you could make after a long day without needing an oven or a fancy pan. It was food that did not waste or wait, made for those who had nothing extra but still found comfort in what little they had. The smell of it filled small cabins and quiet kitchens, the sound of the crackling fire mixing with laughter or prayer. Every crumb reminded people that strength could grow even from ashes.
Fresh ground cornmeal from local mills gave 1970s cornbread a texture and flavor that commercial products have completely lost. Small mills throughout the South ground corn to order, producing meal with the germ and oils intact, giving it sweetness and depth that degerminated versions lack. This cornmeal was alive with flavor, requiring refrigeration because its natural oils would turn rancid. Cornbread made from fresh meal had crumbly richness, golden color, and taste that made it more than just a side dish. Families knew which mills produced the best meal and would drive miles to get it, understanding that this single ingredient determined quality. As small mills closed and mass production took over, cornmeal became standardized, stripped of character for shelf life. The cornbread that once anchored soul food meals became ordinary.
Crab cakes formed into mini patties were seafood luxury that made Thanksgiving feel extra special. The sweet crab meat mixed with breadcrumbs and seasonings before being pan-fried until golden. Grandmothers would pick through cans of crab meat to remove any shell pieces, then gently fold the delicate meat with beaten eggs, breadcrumbs, mayonnaise, mustard, Old Bay seasoning, and sometimes diced bell peppers. The mixture was formed into small patties, each one handled carefully, then refrigerated briefly to help them hold together during cooking. The crab cakes were pan-fried in butter until golden brown on both sides, the exterior developing a crispy crust while the interior stayed moist and packed with sweet crab flavor. In the 1970s, Black households, crab cakes represented coastal sophistication, bringing seafood traditions to holiday tables and elevating the appetizer spread. Children loved mini crab cakes because they felt fancy, tasted sweet rather than fishy, and came in sizes perfect for young appetites. Succotash with lima beans and corn united two ingredients that Native Americans first combined and African American cooks adopted as their own over many generations. Fresh lima beans were simmered until tender, then combined with corn kernels cut fresh from the cob in a pot with butter and a splash of cream when available. The vegetables were cooked together until the starches released and created a naturally thick, creamy consistency without any flour or thickeners. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings needed since the vegetables provided enough flavor on their own merits without embellishment. Bacon was sometimes added for smokiness, but the dish worked perfectly without meat for meatless days. Succotash appeared on Sunday tables year-round, made with dried limas and canned corn in winter when fresh wasn't available. The combination provided complete plant protein. This dish represented cultural exchange that created uniquely American food.
The dish proved that Christmas abundance came from year-round planning. Seven-layer salad was the 1970s potluck sensation that appeared at Black Christmas gatherings with dramatic layers visible through glass bowls. Iceberg lettuce formed the base, followed by layers of peas, celery, onions, cheese, bacon, and thick mayonnaise dressing on top. The salad was assembled hours ahead, allowing flavors to meld while the dressing sealed everything. Each serving scooped through all 7 layers, delivering crunch, creaminess, and variety in every bite. The dish was affordable since lettuce and frozen peas cost little, while the presentation made it feel special. 7-layer salads showed up at church dinners and family gatherings throughout the 1970s. The salad proved that soul food traditions could embrace new ideas while maintaining communal spirit.
Sweet potato pie was more than dessert. It was the heartbeat of the Southern table, the closing note to Sunday dinners and church gatherings that filled the soul as much as the stomach. The kitchen would glow warm with the scent of nutmeg, cinnamon, and baked crust, the air heavy with love and patience. Grandmothers mashed the sweet potatoes smooth by hand, mixing them with sugar, butter, and a touch of milk until the texture felt right. Not too thin, never too thick. Every family had its own secret ingredient, a splash of vanilla here or a pinch of lemon zest there, but the spirit was always the same. It was a pie that didn't need perfection to be perfect, because it carried the story of hands that had known work, joy, and faith. The crust would brown slow in the oven, and while it baked, the room filled with stories, laughter, and sometimes quiet reflection. Sweet potato pie wasn't about indulgence. It was about heritage, memory, and care. Even today, one bite can take you back to wooden tables, family prayers, and the sound of someone humming while they cleaned up the dishes. It was warmth you could taste, and love you could hold on a fork. Fried cabbage with bacon grease was the meal you made when the pantry looked bare, but your will stayed strong. A head of cabbage, a bit of onion, and a spoonful of saved bacon grease could stretch into supper for an entire family. The crackle of the skillet filled the kitchen like music, turning simple leaves into something rich and smoky. This dish carried the scent of thrift and memory, the kind that lingered long after the plates were empty. The secret was balance, enough fat for flavor, enough salt for soul, and enough patience to let it caramelize just right. Cabbage may have been cheap, but it was treated like gold by those who knew its worth. Served hot with a piece of cornbread or rice, it became proof that a meal didn't have to be fancy to feel like a blessing. Fried cabbage with bacon grease was more than sustenance. It was pride in a pan. Each bite told a story of survival, of turning scarcity into satisfaction. It was the art of making the ordinary taste extraordinary, one skillet at a time.
Homegrown vegetables from backyard gardens brought freshness to 1970s. Soul food that grocery store produce cannot touch. Families cultivated collards, tomatoes, okra, and squash in small plots, picking them hours before they reached the dinner table. The soil was rich with compost, producing vegetables with intense flavor that mass-produced crops lack. Children helped tend these gardens, learning which plants needed more water and when to harvest for peak tastes. This connection to the earth meant every meal carried the pride of self-sufficiency. Tomatoes tasted like summer itself, and collard greens held sweetness that disappeared once shipped across the country in refrigerated trucks. The loss of backyard gardens severed a direct link between families and their food, replacing it with bland supermarket convenience.
Fried chicken wings with hot sauce and butter created sticky, finger-licking appetizers that had children lined up before dinner was announced, their crispy exteriors giving way to tender meat falling off the bone. Families prepared massive batches on Thanksgiving morning, seasoning them with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, before dredging in flour and dropping into cast-iron skillets filled with bubbling hot oil. The wings fried until golden brown and crackling crisp, filling kitchens with aromas that drew everyone from every corner. Once drained and still hot, wings were tossed in melted butter and hot sauce, the heat always bold and spicy. In the 1970s, Black households, these wings represented abundance, showing guests everyone was welcome to eat their fill. Children loved them because they were handheld, required no utensils, and delivered maximum flavor with every bite. Okra soup stretched vegetables into filling meals that provided nutrition and comfort during impossible economic times. Fresh okra from summer gardens or dried okra stored from previous harvests went into pots with tomatoes, onions, and whatever else the garden provided. The okra released natural thickeners as it cooked, creating viscous soup that coated the spoon and filled empty stomachs. Black cooks added rice to make the soup even more substantial, transforming a few vegetables into meals for entire families. The dish carried flavors that connected African American communities to West African ancestors who had cooked similar soups for centuries. In rural Louisiana and South Carolina, okra soup appeared regularly because okra grew prolifically in southern heat. The slime that some people found off-putting became crucial for thickening without expensive starches or cream. Families ate this soup with cornbread, using the bread to soak up every drop of precious broth. Children grew up loving okra soup's unique texture, finding comfort in its warmth and fullness despite systematic oppression.
Peanut butter fudge was the Christmas candy that 1970s Black families made in batches, large enough to share with neighbors and fill gift tins. Sugar, milk, and butter were boiled to softball stage. Then peanut butter and vanilla were beaten in until the mixture turned thick and creamy. Poured into buttered pans and scored while still warm, the fudge set into squares that satisfied both sweet and salty cravings. Peanut butter cost less than chocolate, while delivering protein and richness that made small pieces surprisingly filling. The candy kept well, lasting through the holiday season when stored properly. Making fudge became a family activity, with children watching for the right consistency. Peanut butter fudge proved that homemade candy created memories store-bought versions never could. Divinity candy was the cloud-like confection that appeared at 1970s Black Christmas gatherings when the weather cooperated and humidity stayed low. Sugar syrup was boiled to hardball stage, then slowly poured into beaten egg whites while mixing continuously until the candy turned glossy and held its shape. Spoonfuls were dropped onto wax paper where they set into pillowy mounds. Pecans were often pressed into tops for crunch. Divinity required patience in dry weather since humidity prevented proper setting, making successful batches feel like small victories. The candy looked elegant enough for any gift box, despite costing almost nothing. Divinity proved that technique and timing created confections rivaling expensive store-bought treats.
Neck bones and rice were the kind of meal that turned scraps into celebration. It started with a pot, a handful of onions, and some patience, because neck bones took their time. The meat clung tight to the bone at first, but hours of simmering turned it tender enough to fall apart with a spoon. The broth thickened as it cooked, rich with flavor, and when poured over rice, it became the kind of meal that could stretch a little bit of meat into a full dinner for everyone. This dish taught families the beauty in the overlooked, in making something out of almost nothing. Children might not have understood it then, but the lesson was simple. Flavor comes from care, not cost. Every bite was a story of resilience, of knowing that hard work and slow cooking could still bring joy to the table. Neck bones and rice were humble, yes, but they were sacred too, because they tasted like gratitude. Cowpea soup simmered like a prayer whispered over a fire. The pot would start with water, a scoop of dried field peas, and maybe a scrap of salted meat if the week had been kind. Onions and garlic joined in, releasing their scent as the broth thickened into something golden and strong. The cowpeas, small and sturdy, softened slowly, their flavor deepening with every hour. This wasn't fast food, it was patient food, built on rhythm and time. Families made it during harvest, when work was hard and hands needed warmth. It was ladled into tin bowls and passed around without ceremony, each bite grounding you in gratitude. Sometimes cornbread floated on top like an offering, soaking up the last drops of broth. The soup tasted of earth and labor, of simple things done well. Cowpea soup was both meal and memory, tying together generations who had learned how to make plenty out of little. It was food for body and spirit alike, humble but whole, strong but
Recipes passed down orally carry measurements and techniques that written instructions could never capture. Grandmothers taught by demonstration, showing exactly how much salt fit in a palm, how batter should look when mixed, and when greens had cooked long enough by their color. This knowledge was embodied, stored in hands and eyes rather than paper, refined through generations. Each family's version of common dishes differed based on these transmissions, creating distinctive tastes belonging to specific bloodlines. The cook's judgment mattered more than any recipe because she knew when to add more liquid and when a dish was done. As families scattered and oral traditions broke, this embodied knowledge disappeared. Cookbooks captured ingredients but missed the intuition that made the difference between adequate food and soul food.
Chicken salad stuffed in cherry tomatoes created colorful, bite-sized portions that children eagerly grabbed. The cool, creamy chicken salad contrasting with the fresh, slightly tart tomato cups that held everything together. Aunties would hollow out cherry tomatoes using small spoons or melon ballers, creating little edible bowls that were functional and beautiful when arranged on serving platters. The chicken salad was made from finely chopped cooked chicken mixed with mayonnaise, diced celery, sweet pickle relish, and seasonings. The mixture kept cold until serving time. Each hollowed tomato was filled with a generous spoonful of chicken salad, mounded slightly on top for visual appeal. In 1970s Black households, these stuffed tomatoes represented creativity and presentation, transforming simple ingredients into appetizers that looked impressive enough for special occasions. Children loved them because they were perfectly portioned, colorful, and combined familiar flavors in a fun format. Boiled peanuts in the shell were a southern snack that traveled north with migrating families who couldn't imagine Sunday afternoons without them by their side. Green peanuts fresh from the ground were boiled for hours in heavily salted water until they became soft and almost creamy inside their shells. The texture was nothing like roasted peanuts, but instead soft and legume-like, closer to beans than nuts in every way. Families gathered around pots of boiled peanuts, cracking shells and eating the warm, salty contents while sharing conversation and catching up on the week's events together. The preparation was simple, but the timing mattered because undercooked peanuts stayed hard, while overcooked ones turned mushy and unpleasant. Street vendors in the South sold them from steaming pots, but in Harlem, families made their own when green peanuts could be found at markets. Boiled peanuts represented informal Sunday gatherings and the kind of snacking that brought people together.
Corn pudding was the creamy casserole that transformed humble canned corn into something decadent on 1970s Christmas tables. Cream-style corn was mixed with eggs, milk, butter, sugar, and flour, then baked until puffed and golden with caramelized edges. The texture fell between custard and souffle, sweet enough to almost pass for dessert, yet savory enough to accompany meats. Corn pudding cost little since canned corn was cheap and other ingredients were pantry staples. It could be assembled quickly and baked while other dishes finished. Children loved its sweetness while adults appreciated how it complemented ham and turkey.
Oxtail stew was once poor man's food, but no one cared about that when it was bubbling in the pot. The meat cooked so long it slid right off the bone, blending into a broth thickened with onions, carrots, and patience. This was not fast food. It was time turned into tenderness. You could taste the work in every bite, the care that turned scraps into gold. Families gathered around it, spooning out bowls that steamed up their glasses and filled their hearts. Children waited for their turn, knowing that this stew meant love in its purest form. The pot sat heavy on the stove, simmering slow while the day stretched on. Each bowl carried the scent of garlic, pepper, and home. Oxtail stew wasn't about luxury. It was about skill, about making beauty out of what others threw away. It was a meal that said no matter how little you had, you could still make something worth remembering. Okra and tomato stew was a dish where heritage met hunger and turned it into comfort. Born from African roots and southern soil, it blended the earthiness of okra with the tang of ripe tomatoes in a thick, bubbling pot. The slime that many feared became silk under the right hands, thickening the stew into a rich, flavorful broth. Onions, garlic, and a few peppers added depth, while a dash of salt or cayenne made the flavors sing. Families often served it over rice or ate it plain with a piece of cornbread, wiping the last drops from their plates. This dish wasn't just food. It was identity, a reflection of generations who made do and made magic. It connected farm to family, past to present, and hunger to heart. The smell alone carried memories of warm kitchens and laughter that refused to fade. Okra and tomato stew was a promise that no ingredient was too humble to become beautiful. It was the taste of tradition kept alive, no matter the hardship, and a reminder that every simmering pot held more than flavor. It held history.
Seasoned salt blending was a personalized art that gave each family's fried foods their distinctive taste. African-American cooks created custom spice mixtures combining salt with paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and sometimes cayenne. These blends were mixed in large batches and stored in repurposed jars, always within arm's reach during cooking. The proportions varied by family, with some preferring heavier garlic notes while others emphasized heat. Children grew up recognizing their grandmother's specific seasoned salt as the taste of home, a flavor impossible to replicate with store-bought alternatives. Some cooks guarded exact ratios as closely held secrets, revealing them only to trusted family members. These personalized blends transformed identical ingredients into dishes that tasted uniquely like one kitchen.
Rumaki-wrapped chicken livers and water chestnuts in bacon created sophisticated bites that curious children tried, the crispy bacon exterior making them willing to taste the unfamiliar liver that turned out mild. Aunties would cut chicken livers into bite-sized pieces, marinate them briefly in soy sauce and ginger, then wrap them with water chestnut slices in bacon before securing everything with toothpicks. The bundles were arranged on baking sheets and roasted until the bacon crisped and rendered, the fat keeping the liver moist while adding smoky saltiness that transformed the organ meat into something special. As they cooked, the soy sauce caramelized slightly, creating a sweet savory glaze that coated the bacon. In Black households during the 1970s, rumaki represented culinary adventurousness, recipes borrowed from magazines that brought international flavors to holiday tables. Children who were brave enough to try them discovered that bacon really did make everything better.
Watergate salad was the mysterious green dessert that swept through Black churches and family reunions during the 1970s Christmas season. Pistachio pudding mix was combined with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, pecans, and whipped topping, creating fluffy sweetness unlike traditional soul food. Nobody knew exactly why it was called Watergate, but everyone agreed it was delicious and easy to make. The pale green color made it festive, and children loved its texture. All ingredients came from cans and boxes, making it affordable during busy holidays. Watergate salad represented the 1970s embrace of convenience while maintaining communal sharing spirit. The salad proved that Black Christmas tables welcomed new traditions alongside cherished old ones.
Lye hominy was ancient food, made by soaking dried corn in lye water until the kernels swelled and their hulls loosened. Black mothers learned this process from indigenous peoples and African traditions, creating food that was more nutritious than regular corn. The process began with making lye from wood ashes, then soaking field corn for days until the kernels transformed into pale, ghostly white hominy. After rinsing away all traces of lye, the hominy was boiled until tender. The taste was earthy and slightly mineral, with a chewy texture that satisfied hunger like nothing else. In the 1920s, hominy appeared regularly on Black tables because it turned cheap field corn into something substantial. Mothers fried hominy in bacon grease for breakfast, creating crispy cakes that children ate with molasses. They stewed it with meat for dinner. Lye hominy represented knowledge passed through generations, showing that food preparation was both science and art. The technique has mostly disappeared, replaced by canned hominy that lacks the texture of the hand-processed original. Pot scrappin' soup was the kind of meal that made use of every last bit that life gave. When the pantry was empty, people turned to what clung to the bottom of the pot. They poured in hot water, scraped up every browned edge and leftover piece of vegetable or meat, and built a new meal from what was left behind. It simmered for hours until the flavors came together, smoky and deep, with hints of salt and spice from earlier meals. No two pots ever tasted the same, and that was the beauty of it. Sometimes it had bits of onion, sometimes beans or bones, always something saved from before. It filled the air with a smell of gratitude, the kind that made even the poorest home feel rich. Children dunked stale cornbread in it, soaking up every drop. Pot scrappin' soup reminded families that nothing was ever truly gone, not flavor, not hope, not care. It turned waste into warmth and leftovers into love. The sound of that bubbling pot was a hymn for survival, proof that the end of the week still had something worth waiting for. Eggshell pudding was an act of pure ingenuity, a sweet custard built from things no one thought could be used. Families saved eggshells, washed and dried them, then ground them into powder for extra calcium. That powder went into milk, sugar, and cornstarch, stirred together until it thickened over the stove. It set in jars or bowls, smooth and pale, a dessert that looked humble but held the taste of patience. It was soft, slightly sweet, and carried the faint scent of vanilla if a family could afford it. Children thought it was magic, how scraps turned into something good. It filled more than bellies. It filled hearts with gratitude. Eggshell pudding was the promise that nothing had to go to waste, that even the smallest fragments had purpose. In every spoonful was the spirit of endurance, a quiet hymn to survival sung right from the kitchen stove. Churned milk soup was what you made when you had finished making butter and still needed a meal. That leftover buttermilk became the base for a tangy, hearty soup that could feed a family from a single pot. It was mixed with cornmeal, herbs, and whatever vegetables were on hand, then simmered until it thickened like velvet. The smell was sharp but cozy, filling the kitchen with warmth and familiarity. Some families dropped bits of bread into the bowl, letting it soak up the flavor. It was simple food, born from old farm routines and frugal wisdom. Churned milk soup taught that nothing should ever be wasted, not even the scraps of a good day's work. It soothed hunger and reminded everyone that comfort could come from the most ordinary things. With each spoonful, it carried the echo of laughter and work from generations before. Stewed tomatoes and rice were a Depression-era miracle, born from necessity but remembered for comfort. Tomatoes stewed down until soft and tangy, mixed with rice that soaked up every drop of flavor. Sometimes a little sugar was added to balance the bite, Sometimes onions or bell peppers joined in for depth. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It filled the belly, warmed the heart, and reminded people that simple could still mean special. For many, it was dinner after long days in the field or factory when money was tight but pride was strong. The steam rising from the pot carried both memory and gratitude. Even when meat was scarce, stewed tomatoes and rice made sure no one went to bed hungry. It was the taste of care and perseverance wrapped in one humble bowl.
Chess pie was the simple custard dessert that proved 1970s Black bakers could create magic from nothing more than pantry staples. Sugar, butter, eggs, and a splash of vinegar or buttermilk, the filling was poured into homemade or store-bought crusts and baked until just set, its top developing characteristic golden crust. Chess pie required no fruit, nuts, or fancy ingredients, yet delivered satisfaction that rivaled complex desserts. The name's origin remained mysterious, though some said it came from just pie, spoken with southern drawl. Chess pie cost pennies to make, yet tasted rich and indulgent. The dessert proved that soul food excellence came from technique and intention, not expensive ingredients.
Hoghead cheese or souse meat was not fancy food, but it had deep roots in tradition and respect for what you had. Made from the head of the pig, boiled, seasoned, and set in its own broth, it was a dish born from necessity and pride. It was eaten cold, sliced thin, and often shared at the table with crackers and conversation. What others might have thrown away became something flavorful and lasting in the right hands. It spoke of times when wasting food was unthinkable, when every part of the animal was used to honor the work that went into raising it. The smell of it cooking filled the whole house, sharp and strong, but it was the kind of smell that meant good things were coming. When cooled and sliced, it glistened in the light like proof of survival itself. Each piece held a story of long days, careful hands, and families who knew that resourcefulness was its own kind of wealth. Souse meat wasn't about glamour, it was about gratitude. Even if you didn't grow up eating it, the story it told was universal. Make do, make it good, and never take a meal for granted. Sausage balls made with breakfast sausage, cheese, and biscuit mix, baked into savory spheres that children popped into their mouths like candy, their crispy exteriors giving way to soft, cheesy, slightly spicy interiors. Mothers would combine raw breakfast sausage with shredded sharp cheddar cheese and dry biscuit mix, kneading everything together until well combined. The mixture was then rolled into balls about an inch in diameter, arranged on baking sheets with space between them, and baked until golden brown. As they baked, the fat from the sausage rendered while the cheese melted, creating savory, flavorful bites that were crispy outside and tender inside. In the 1970s, Black households, sausage balls represented easy entertaining, a recipe that could be made ahead. Children loved sausage balls because they were perfectly portioned, required no utensils, and delivered breakfast flavors in snackable form.
Well, water from deep sources gave 1970s soul food a mineral quality that treated city water cannot provide. Rural families drew water from wells dug by ancestors, its taste clean and slightly earthy with trace minerals affecting everything it touched. This water made tea taste richer, soup broth deeper, and beans cooked to better texture than chlorinated municipal supplies. Cooks knew intuitively that water mattered, even if they could not explain why. Coffee brewed with well water had roundness that tap water flattens, and vegetables simmered in it absorbed subtle flavors. When rural families moved to cities or connected to municipal systems, this invisible ingredient disappeared. The same recipes made with treated water taste different in ways most people cannot identify, but somehow notice.
Fried okra rounds served with ranch dressing were crispy, crunchy appetizers that introduced children to vegetables in ways that made them forget they were eating something healthy, the golden coating making every bite feel like a treat. Mothers would slice fresh okra into thick rounds, coating them first in buttermilk that helped breading adhere, then dredging them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour, salt, pepper, and garlic powder. The okra rounds were dropped into hot oil where they bubbled and crisped, the cornmeal coating turning golden brown while the okra inside stayed tender. Once drained on paper towels and sprinkled with extra salt while still hot, the okra was piled into serving bowls and placed near small dishes of ranch dressing that children dunked them into with enthusiasm. In Black households during the 1970s, fried okra represented Southern tradition meeting holiday hospitality. Children loved fried okra because it felt like eating fried chicken in vegetable form.
Turkey wings and gravy were the 1970s answer to expensive whole turkeys, stretching holiday budgets while delivering all the flavor families craved. Wings were seasoned with garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, salt, and pepper, then browned in hot oil until the skin crisped golden. The wings were transferred to roasting pans, covered with rich gravy made from drippings and broth, then baked until the meat fell from the bone. Mothers bought wings by the flat since they cost a fraction of whole birds, yet fed families generously. The gravy soaked into rice or dressing, making every bite feel like celebration. Turkey wings appeared on Christmas tables throughout Black neighborhoods, proving that smart shopping created feasts rivaling any expensive spread.
Molasses bread was the sweetness that softened hard weeks. Made from sorghum or cane syrup, it was a dark, sticky loaf that baked up rich and fragrant even when sugar was scarce. A single jar of syrup could stretch through countless loaves, turning thrift into comfort. It came out of the oven glossy and dense, the kind of bread you sliced thin to make it last longer. The taste was deep and earthy, sweet without being showy, a flavor born from the fields where sorghum stalks waved in the sun. On Sundays, families shared it warm with butter or a drizzle of leftover syrup, its smell filling every corner of home. The crust held a quiet crunch, while the inside stayed soft, like memory itself. It was both humble and proud, a loaf that didn't need fancy ingredients to feel like celebration. For people who knew want, molasses bread was a small luxury, a reward for making it through the week. Each slice carried the warmth of family hands and the sweetness of work well done. In every crumb was proof that joy could rise from scarcity and bake into something lasting. Peach cobbler with biscuit crust was sunshine baked into dessert form. Juicy peaches simmered with sugar and a little spice until their juices bubbled thick. On top went dollops of biscuit dough, browned to perfection and soaking in the syrup beneath. It smelled like summer evenings and sounded like laughter when the spoon broke through the crust. Served with a scoop of cream or ice cream, it felt like joy in a dish. Families made it from fresh fruit when they could, canned peaches when they couldn't. It didn't matter, because the love stayed the same. Peach cobbler was passed around after church, after long days, or just because someone felt generous. It was sweet, golden, and proud. A dessert that said, "We made it through." Every bite tasted like gratitude.
German chocolate cake was the towering showpiece that appeared at 1970s Black Christmas gatherings, its coconut pecan frosting making it unforgettable. The chocolate cake layers were rich but not too sweet, providing perfect backdrop for the sticky, chunky frosting. The frosting was cooked on the stove top, combining evaporated milk, sugar, egg yolks, butter, vanilla, coconut, and pecans into caramel-colored deliciousness. Assembling the cake took patience, spreading frosting between layers and on top, while leaving the sides bare to show the dark chocolate. German chocolate cake required more effort than everyday desserts, which made it appropriate for special occasions. The cake proved that Christmas deserved extra effort in the kitchen. Families remembered who made the best version and requested it year after year.
Lard rendering and storage techniques were essential knowledge that determined the quality of every fried dish coming from African American kitchens. Families acquired fresh pork fat from local butchers, cut it into small cubes, and cooked it slowly over the lowest heat for hours. The process required constant attention, stirring regularly to prevent scorching, while fat liquefied into pure white liquid gold. Once rendered, lard was strained through cheesecloth multiple times to remove crackling remnants that could burn during frying. Storage was equally precise, with families keeping rendered lard in ceramic crocks or glass jars in cool cellars where it remained fresh for months. Some households added salt to extend shelf life. This homemade lard produced fried foods with flavors that commercial shortenings could never duplicate.
Bacon-wrapped water chestnuts delivered crispy, salty, and slightly sweet bites that children fought over despite not knowing exactly what water chestnuts were, the bacon exterior and crunchy interior creating mysterious but delicious combinations. Aunties would drain cans of whole water chestnuts, wrapping each one with half a strip of bacon and securing it with toothpicks before arranging them on baking sheets. Before baking, each bundle was brushed with a mixture of brown sugar and soy sauce that caramelized during cooking, creating a sweet salty glaze that coated the bacon. The water chestnuts roasted until the bacon was crispy and rendered, the fat dripping away while the sugar coating turned golden brown and slightly sticky. In Black households during the 1970s, bacon-wrapped water chestnuts represented sophistication borrowed from magazines, recipes that seemed fancy but remained simple for home cooks. Children loved them because bacon made everything better. Smothered cabbage with bacon drippings transformed humble vegetables into something families actually craved on Sunday tables throughout Harlem apartments and brownstones. A whole head of cabbage was cored and cut into thick wedges, then browned in rendered bacon fat until the edges caramelized and turned slightly sweet with concentrated flavor. Onions were added along with a splash of water. Then the pot was covered tightly and allowed to steam until the cabbage became silky tender throughout every layer. The bacon drippings provided richness that made the vegetables taste almost meaty, while the natural sugars in the cabbage intensified through the slow cooking process. This dish cost nearly nothing since cabbage was cheap year-round and bacon fat was saved from every breakfast without exception. It appeared alongside every Sunday meat as an essential part of the meal that nobody would dare skip.
Corn pudding appeared at church potlucks and family dinners throughout the South. The dish proved that convenience ingredients could create something celebratory. And tomato pie was the savory summer dish that earned its way onto 1970s Christmas tables when families used home-canned tomatoes preserved from gardens. A pre-baked pie crust was layered with thick tomato slices, fresh basil when available, and generous amounts of shredded cheese mixed with mayonnaise. The pie baked until bubbly and golden, its aroma filling kitchens with the promise of tangy, cheesy goodness. Each slice revealed layers of red tomato against creamy cheese topping. Tomato pie cost almost nothing when tomatoes came from jars families had put up themselves during summer. It provided vegetable dish and comfort food in one, satisfying both practical and indulgent needs. The pie connected winter celebrations to summer abundance. Tomato pie proved that preserving the harvest paid dividends at Christmas.
Turkey wings with gravy were a quiet luxury, made from what was left behind after the big pieces were gone. They simmered for hours until the meat slid from the bone, soaking in a gravy thick with onions and flour. The sauce was glossy and rich, clinging to everything it touched. This was Sunday food, made slowly while church shoes dried by the door. It turned humble cuts into something you could be proud to serve. Every forkful told a story of making the most of little. Steam fogged the windows as families gathered round the table, hungry but patient. The smell of gravy felt like safety, like home after a long day. There was nothing rushed about it. Every stir, every taste test, carried care and memory. When poured over rice or mashed potatoes, it became the centerpiece of any table. Turkey wings taught people that comfort didn't come from cost, but from the hands that cooked it. They were food for the spirit, a slow-cooked reminder that love always found a way. Turkey wings with gravy were proof that comfort did not need cost. It only needed time, care, and family. Hoppin John was more than food. It was a wish whispered into every new year and a memory of old fields and family prayers. Made from black-eyed peas, rice, and a scrap of salted pork, it carried a meaning far greater than its humble parts. Each bowl symbolized luck, wealth, and resilience, a quiet hope for better days ahead. Born on plantations where ingredients were scarce, Hoppin John turned survival into tradition. The peas represented coins, the rice abundance, and the pork, the flavor of prosperity. It became a holiday staple across generations, cooked in cast-iron pots and served with greens on the side. The slow simmer filled homes with comfort, while the taste spoke of endurance. People didn't just eat Hoppin John, they believed in it. It was a way to honor ancestors who worked the land and still found joy in sharing a simple meal. Every spoonful connected past to present, hardship to hope. In the rhythm of the South, Hoppin John remains a dish that keeps faith alive, proving that luck can be cooked, shared, and passed down like love itself.
Cast iron skillets were the heartbeat of every African-American kitchen in the 1970s, seasoned over decades with layers of flavor no modern pan could replicate. These heavy black skillets had been passed down through generations, their surfaces holding the memory of thousands of meals. Every fried chicken breast, every pan of cornbread, every batch of smothered pork chops absorbed and contributed to that irreplaceable seasoning. The iron distributed heat evenly and slowly, creating crusts impossible to achieve on non-stick surfaces. Families guarded these skillets fiercely, never letting soap touch them, only wiping them clean and rubbing them with fat. The food that emerged carried depth from history itself. Modern cookware may be convenient, but it cannot hold the taste of time the way those blackened skillets did.
Pea hull broth was a whisper of a meal, simple but steady. It started after shelling peas for supper, when the hulls piled high in the bowl. Instead of tossing them, families boiled them down into a thin, tea-colored broth. The scent filled the room, earthy and green, like the smell of gardens after rain. Some added salt, others a small spoon of butter, but most drank it plain, grateful for what it offered. It was a tonic for the tired, a light soup for those who had more hunger than food. During lean seasons, it became the first course and sometimes the only course. It carried vitamins, flavor, and memory in one humble bowl. Pea hull broth showed the wisdom in using everything, even what others called waste. It was not fancy, but it was faithful, feeding families with nothing more than time, heat, and care. The warmth of it settled deep, a quiet kind of comfort that made the world feel generous again. Hoghead cheese, or souse meat, was not fancy food, but it had deep roots in tradition and respect for what you had. Made from the head of the pig, boiled, seasoned, and set in its own broth, it was a dish born from necessity and pride. It was eaten cold, sliced thin, and often shared at the table with crackers and conversation. What others might have thrown away became something flavorful and lasting in the right hands. It spoke of times when wasting food was unthinkable, when every part of the animal was used to honor the work that went into raising it. The smell of it cooking filled the whole house, sharp and strong, but it was the kind of smell that meant good things were coming. When cooled and sliced, it glistened in the light like proof of survival itself. Each piece held a story of long days, careful hands, and families who knew that resourcefulness was its own kind of wealth. Souse meat wasn't about glamour, it was about gratitude. Even if you didn't grow up eating it, the story it told was universal. Make do, make it good, and never take a meal for granted.
Apple Brown Betty was the thrifty dessert that turned stale bread and affordable apples into bubbling comfort on 1970s Christmas tables. Layers of buttered bread cubes alternated with sliced apples seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and brown sugar, then baked until the top crisped and the apples softened. The bread absorbed apple juices while developing crunchy edges that contrasted with tender fruit. Brown Betty cost far less than pie, since it required no special crust making skills and used bread that might otherwise go to waste. The dish came together quickly, making it practical for busy holiday cooking. Children loved its sweetness, while adults appreciated the warm spices. Apple Brown Betty proved that resourcefulness created desserts every bit as satisfying as fancy alternatives.
Stewed tomatoes with sugar and bread was a side dish that confused outsiders but comforted families who grew up eating it every Sunday at their family tables. Canned tomatoes were heated with butter, sugar, and a pinch of salt until they became thick and almost jammy in consistency. Day-old bread was torn into chunks and stirred into the pot, where it absorbed the sweet, savory tomato liquid until it became soft and almost custard-like in texture. The dish walked a line between vegetable and dessert, its sweetness balanced by tomato acidity in perfect harmony. Families from Virginia and the Carolinas especially treasured this recipe, passing it down through generations who never questioned its rightful place on the table. Children often preferred this to other vegetables because of its sweetness. The dish represented how migration carried specific regional preferences north to new kitchens. Cheese wafers made with sharp cheddar and butter created crispy, salty crackers that children munched by the handful, their homemade quality far superior to anything store-bought could offer. Grandmothers would cream softened butter with finely shredded sharp cheddar cheese, then gradually add flour, salt, and cayenne pepper until the mixture formed a stiff dough. The dough was rolled into logs, wrapped in wax paper, and chilled until firm, then sliced into thin rounds and baked until golden brown and crispy. As they baked, the cheese melted into the butter and flour, creating crackers that were rich, savory, and addictively crunchy with just a hint of heat from the cayenne. In 1970s, Black households, cheese wafers represented Southern tradition and hospitality, recipes that had been passed down through generations. Children loved cheese wafers because they tasted like cheesy potato chips but felt more sophisticated since they were homemade.
Hand-cranked ice cream at summer gatherings produced texture and freshness that store-bought versions cannot match. Families gathered on porches, taking turns at the crank while rock salt and ice worked their magic on custard made from fresh cream, eggs, and fruit. The process was slow and communal, building anticipation until the dasher stopped and the reward could be served. Children fought over who got to lick the paddle, while adults scooped portions into waiting bowls. The ice cream that emerged was dense, intensely flavored, and so cold it made teeth ache. Peaches picked that morning gave each batch seasonal character impossible to replicate commercially. When electric freezers and store-bought cartons replaced the hand-crank ritual, dessert became convenient but lost the event that made it meaningful.
Shrimp cocktail served in small cups with tangy cocktail sauce was elegant finger food that made children feel sophisticated. The cold, tender shrimp dipped in spicy sweet sauce, creating flavors that seemed fancy. Mothers would boil shrimp in seasoned water with Old Bay seasoning, lemon, and bay leaves until they turned pink and curled, then plunge them into ice water to stop the cooking. Once chilled, the shrimp were peeled and deveined, their tails left on for easy handling, then arranged around small cups filled with cocktail sauce made from ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire sauce. The cocktail sauce had a sharp, tangy kick that balanced the shrimp's natural sweetness, creating combinations that felt restaurant quality. In the 1970s, Black households, shrimp cocktail represented luxury and celebration, an appetizer that elevated holiday gatherings. Children loved shrimp cocktail because they could hold the shrimp by the tail and dip them like French fries.
Rutabaga with bacon was the overlooked vegetable that earned its place on 1970 soul food Christmas tables through sheer deliciousness. Rutabagas were peeled, cubed, and boiled until tender, then masked with butter and seasoned with salt and pepper. Crispy bacon pieces were folded throughout, adding smoky richness and satisfying crunch to the sweet, earthy vegetable. Rutabagas cost far less than sweet potatoes, but offered similar comfort and natural sweetness. The vegetable stored through winter, making it practical and affordable. Children who claim to hate vegetables often ask for seconds of bacon-studded rutabaga. The dish proved that creativity with humble ingredients could create new traditions worth continuing. Rutabaga with bacon showed that 1970s soul food embraced innovation alongside heritage.
Collard greens with smoked turkey necks simmered for hours, turning water into a broth so rich it felt like comfort itself. The smell filled every corner of the house, a slow promise that dinner was coming. You could hear the spoon scrape the bottom of the pot, gathering the greens that had softened just right. The turkey necks gave them body, salt, and soul, something smoky that reminded everyone of home. This was food that took time and taught you to wait, because flavor came to those who were patient. When the pot was opened, the steam carried stories of generations who had cooked the same way. Each bite brought warmth that spread from your chest to your spirit. The greens were never bitter, only bold, tasting like the land they grew from and the hands that harvested them. A bowl of greens could feed more than hunger. It fed pride, warmth, and memory all at once. Grease gravy rice was what people cooked when they refused to let anything go to waste. When breakfast meats were done frying, the leftover grease became treasure. A spoon of flour went in first, sizzling and popping until it turned golden. Then milk or water got poured in, slow and steady, until it thickened into smooth gravy. That hot gravy poured over white rice made something out of nearly nothing. It was salty, creamy, and smoky all at once. The smell filled the house and the taste filled the stomach. Parents called it breakfast, but it could carry a family through an entire day. It came from kitchens that knew survival like a second language, where flavor was earned from thrift and patience. Kids grew up thinking it was comfort food, not knowing it was born from rationing and struggle. Grease gravy rice was more than a recipe. It was a declaration that no meal was too small to matter. Every bite was a promise that the family would eat, even when times were lean. It was humble food that carried pride on a spoon.
Lard and animal fats were the foundation of flavor in 1970s soul food kitchens, providing richness that vegetable oils simply cannot match. Every serious cook kept a container of rendered pork fat near the stove, ready to add depth to vegetables, fry chicken to golden perfection, or create flaky biscuit crusts. The fat came from home-butchered hogs or local butchers who understood real cooking. This was about taste and tradition, passed through generations who knew flavor lived in the fat. When grandmothers fried catfish or made pie crusts, they reached for lard without hesitation. The move toward processed oils changed soul food fundamentally. What we gained in supposed health benefits, we lost in the unmistakable richness that once defined every dish.
Cocktail sausages wrapped in flaky biscuit dough emerged from ovens as golden crescents that children grabbed from cooling racks, burning their fingers but unable to wait. Mothers would roll out refrigerated biscuit dough, cutting it into strips before wrapping each small sausage like a tiny gift and arranging them on greased baking sheets. The wrapped sausages baked until the dough turned golden brown and flaky, the fat from the sausages creating pockets of rich, meaty flavor. Some families brushed the tops with melted butter and sesame seeds before baking, adding extra richness and subtle, nutty crunch. In Black households during the 1970s, these sausage rolls appeared at every major holiday, their ease of preparation making them perfect for busy cooks managing multiple dishes. Children loved them because they were small, portable, and perfectly sized for little hands. Buttermilk cornbread was the foundation that no Sunday dinner could exist without in Harlem households that carried Southern traditions north with their migrating families. Stone-ground cornmeal was mixed with tangy buttermilk, a little flour, baking powder, salt, and sometimes a touch of sugar depending on family preference and regional heritage. The batter was poured into cast iron preheated with bacon drippings or lard, creating immediate sizzle that promised proper crust. The bread baked until the top turned golden and the edges pulled away from the pan slightly. Proper cornbread had a crusty bottom and crumbly interior that soaked up potlikker, gravy, and bean juice without dissolving into mush. Families judged each other's cooking by cornbread quality, arguing endlessly whether sugar belonged at all. Children crumbled cornbread into buttermilk for snacks. This bread connected every meal to ancestral tables. Red beans and smoked sausage simmered for hours until the whole house smelled like Sunday. You could walk in from church and know exactly what was waiting. A big pot on the stove, bubbling low, the beans soft, and the sausage giving up its flavor to the broth. This meal didn't rush anyone. It was patient, just like the people who made it. A single pot could feed 10 or more and no one left hungry. It came from the habit of stretching every ingredient as far as it could go, turning beans, onions, and a few slices of meat into something hearty enough to carry a family through the week. A ladle full of red beans over rice wasn't just filling, it was family, fellowship, and endurance all in one bowl. You could taste history in every bite, the kind of cooking that spoke of faith and gratitude. Even today, red beans and sausage remind us that slow-cooked food was never just about eating, it was about waiting, sharing, and remembering what home feels like. Lard cakes were the sweetheart of hard times, the kind of dessert that brought back joy when butter was a dream. Made from flour, sugar, and a scoop of lard saved from breakfast, they baked up soft and fragrant. The smell filled the house, buttery without butter, rich without cream. People called them poverty cakes, but they tasted like victory. The lard kept them moist for days, and a touch of spice or molasses made them taste like something from a bakery. Children licked the crumbs from their fingers, not caring that it came from the same jar used for frying eggs. Every family had their own version, some with raisins, some with cinnamon, each one proud and personal. Lard cakes were a reminder that sweetness was not about luxury, it was about invention. They were proof that love could rise from scarcity, baked golden in worn pans and shared without shame. In kitchens filled with laughter and thrift, lard cakes turned necessity into delight.
Hand-churned butter appeared on soul food tables throughout the 1970s, offering richness that store-bought sticks could never match. Families with rural connections often received fresh butter made the old way, its color deeper and flavor more complex than anything mass-produced. This butter melted into hot cornbread with sweet nuttiness, transformed vegetables into something luxurious, and made biscuits taste special. Churning required patience and willingness to work for quality rather than accepting convenience. Even urban families sometimes made their own when cream was available, treating it as a connection to traditions. The taste difference was unmistakable. Modern butter, standardized for shelf stability, carries none of the character that homemade versions brought to every plate they touched.
Cocktail meatballs simmered in grape jelly and chili sauce created sweet, savory bites that children couldn't resist, the glossy sauce coating each meatball like candy while delivering unexpected flavors. Mothers would brown frozen meatballs in skillets before transferring them to slow cookers or pots where they simmered in a mixture of grape jelly and bottled chili sauce that melted together into a thick, shiny glaze. The combination sounded strange but tasted magical, the grape jelly's sweetness balancing the chili sauce's tang and creating a flavor profile that kept people reaching for more. As the meatballs simmered, they absorbed the sauce and became tender, the exterior developing a sticky coating that made them perfect for spearing with toothpicks. In Black households during the 1970s, these cocktail meatballs represented easy elegance, a recipe that seemed fancy but required minimal effort. Children loved them because they were bite-sized, required no cutting, and tasted like a sweet, savory treat,
creating tender crumb and subtle citrus flavor. Butter, sugar, and eggs were creamed together, then flour and 7-Up were added alternately until the batter turned smooth and light. The soda's carbonation made the cake rise beautifully, while its citrus notes perfumed each slice. Baked in a bundt pan and glazed with powdered sugar icing, the cake looked impressive enough for any Christmas table. The recipe spread through Black communities via word of mouth, each baker adding personal touches. Some added lemon extract for brighter flavor, while others kept it simple. 7-Up cake proved that ingenuity with everyday ingredients created memorable desserts. The cake became a 1970s classic that families still request today.
Hoppin John was a meal that sang of hope and hard work, rice cooked with peas and salt pork in one big pot. It came from the South, from kitchens that knew how to stretch a meal into something more. Each bite was smoky, peppery, and full of life, eaten with quiet gratitude. Folks said it brought luck if you ate it on New Year's Day, but truthfully, it brought peace any day you needed it. The recipe changed from home to home, but its heart stayed the same. Mothers stirred it slow, tasting and adjusting until it felt right. The scent of simmering pork filled the air, wrapping everyone in warmth. Even when times were hard, this dish carried faith in better days. You could hear spoons clinking in bowls as laughter filled the room. It was food that brought generations together, each one adding their touch, their story, their hope. Hoppin John was the sound of resilience, bubbling softly on the stove. It reminded everyone that blessings could be simple and fortune could fit inside a pot. Hoppin John was a dish of faith, a reminder that even humble food could taste like fortune. Pig's feet with vinegar sauce were not for the impatient or the faint-hearted. They demanded long hours of boiling and careful cleaning before the meat turned silky soft and rich with flavor. For many families, this dish represented endurance itself, transforming what others threw away into a delicacy that filled the soul. The vinegar cut through the heaviness, adding a tang that woke the taste buds and stretched the appetite. When cooked just right, the gelatin shimmered, thickening the sauce and coating every tender bite. Pig's feet weren't glamorous, but they were honest. They told the truth about survival, about making something from nearly nothing and taking pride in it. Around tables, they sparked stories and laughter, the kind only shared by people who'd known struggle and joy in equal measure. The smell of that vinegar sauce carried through neighborhoods like a promise that good eating didn't need riches. It reminded everyone that patience, thrift, and skill could turn even the roughest ingredients into a dish worthy of celebration. Pig's feet with vinegar sauce were a triumph of flavor and faith, proof that nothing worth keeping ever comes easy.
Fresh-killed chickens meant something entirely different in 1970s soul food than the plastic-wrapped packages lining grocery cases today. Families bought birds from local farmers or backyard coops, selecting them live and knowing exactly
Pig feet and greens combined two Sunday essentials into one dish that fed families affordably while delivering nutrition and deep satisfaction. The feet were
Congealed cranberry salad was the jiggly showpiece that
sweet potato biscuits were the soft-spoken stars of every humble table. Made from mashed sweet potatoes, flour, and a touch of lard, they carried the sweetness Chicken gizzards and
Cooking over open fires at family reunions added smoke and char that indoor cooking cannot achieve. Large gatherings happened outdoors, where men tended pits dug in the ground, cooking whole hogs or massive quantities of ribs over
chitterlings took courage and care to make, a dish that started hard and ended
Cooking with love and patience was not just sentiment, but a tangible ingredient in 1970s soul food that
Spinach dip, served with crackers and vegetables, was creamy, savory goodness that children scooped up enthusiastically. The rich cream cheese and sour cream base mixed with Which cheap soul food dish takes you straight back to Grandma's kitchen? Drop your favorite memory in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so we can keep serving up forgotten flavors.